the weather has been something else lately, has it not?
Yeah.
I mean, when I first moved here in December, it was hot every day. It was cool. I enjoyed it. We got to go swimming and go to the beach, and we had a lot of fun. But this past week, it was raining, and we looked at the weather forecast, and it's raining the next 6 days straight about.
Oh, no.
Wow. But I was pretty excited. Today, I got here a little early, and I got to go to Starbucks and get my favorite hot drink from Starbucks. I actually left that part forever. But my favorite refreshing green tea with milk and sugar, because I was fired up. Amen? So thanks for your patience. But with the weather's been crazy, I thought of a funny weather joke, and I wanted to share it with you this morning. So hope you're encouraged. A long time ago, in communist Russia, there was a famous weatherman named Rudolph. He always had a 100% accuracy rate for his forecast for the Russian weather conditions. His people loved him and respected him for his faultless forecast. He was particularly good at predicting the rain. One night, despite the clear skies, he made the prediction that on the 6 p.m. news broadcast that a violent storm was approaching. It would flood the town in which he and his wife lived. He warned the people to take proper precautions and prepare for the worst. After he arrived home late that evening, his wife met him at the door and started arguing with him about the weather prediction was the most ridiculous thing he had ever done. This time, she said, he had made a terrible mistake. There wasn't a cloud in the sky within 20 kilometers of the village. As a matter of fact, that day had been the most beautiful day that town had ever seen, and quite obvious, it wasn't going to rain. He told her to be quiet and listen to him. That's not the way to talk to your wife, but... He said it was going to rain, and that's final. He had all the Russian heritage behind him, and he knew what he was talking about. She argued, although he came from a proud heritage, it wasn't going to rain. They argued back and forth for hours, so much that they went to bed angry at each other. During the night, sure enough, was one of the worst rainstorms that village had seen. That morning, when Rudolph and his wife arose, they looked out the window and saw the water that flooded their town. "See?" said Rudolph, "I told you it was going to rain." His wife admitted, once again, "Your predictions came true. But I want to know, just how are you so accurate, Rudolph?" He said, "You see, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer." It's a Russian joke, guys. You got to get it. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, amen? The title of our lesson today is A Christian Forecast. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. No? Rudolph. Amen. Our first point is the storms of life. Turn over to Acts chapter 27. It's a Russian joke. You got to bear with me. Acts chapter 27. So the title of our lesson, as I said, is A Christian Forecast. And our first point is the storms of life. Of course, we've been studying out the book of Acts, and we're closing out our series this week. And in there, of course, last week we learned what an adventure that Paul's life was. You guys remember that?
Amen.
And remember last week he was getting beat, and then he got arrested, and that saved his life. And then he stood on trial with all these different guys. And then they found he was innocent, and they gave him an option to even set him free. But then he decided, he appealed to Caesar. You know, Caesar was the ultimate ruler of the time, and he said, "No, I'll go stand before Caesar." And he made a decision to stay locked up in chains. So at this point in time, where we're going to pick it up in chapter 27, he's on a boat and sailing for Rome. A few minor winds start to pick up, and Paul gives them a little warning. Guys, maybe we should stay back. Maybe we should harbor in. Paul was a pretty spiritual guy. And when a spiritual guy gives you a warning, sometimes it's good to take some time and listen to the advice. Amen? So we're going to pick it up here in chapter 27 and verse 13. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force called the northeaster, swept down from the islands. This ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. So they gave way to it and were driven along. As we passed the lee of a small island called Claudia, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. So the men hoisted it aboard. Then they passed ropes under the boat itself to hold it together, because they were afraid they were going to run aground the sandbars of Citrus. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they went to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. Now that's an adventure church, amen? Amen. So they're going out to sea, and they feel some light winds, and then, oh my gosh, the northeaster wind comes, the hurricane winds. And as anybody that knows about hurricanes knows, some of the most powerful hurricane winds can go up to 249 kilometers per hour. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in 249 kilometers per hour winds, but that is some powerful winds. And as Paul's out there on the boat and all the guys, they feel a wind around 249 kilometers. Can you imagine that? That'd be kind of scary. And as they start to feel that wind, everything just starts to go bizarre. And they're freaking, oh my gosh, what is going on here? So the first thing they decide to do is they get the lifeboats in order. And as they try to get the lifeboats, because they can't even get the lifeboat down. So they pull it in. And the next day, the water's coming in the boat. Imagine, one of those cartoons where they're trying to get the water out of the boat with the buckets. So they just throw all their cargo overboard. The next day, the rider's so shocked that he says, even with our own hands, we threw out the tackle. We just gave up hope, get it off the boat. We just want to survive. And then they got to the point where they even tied ropes around the boat, saying, oh my gosh, the boat, they just felt like it was going to fall apart. So they tie all these ropes around it and tie it tight, just holding it, trying to hold it. I don't know if you've ever been there. They're trying to hold it together. And as they're holding it together, they just don't know what they're going to do. It says at that point, they haven't seen sun, they haven't seen stars, they haven't seen moon. They give up any hope of being saved. It's funny, in life sometimes, it can feel out of control. We're just trying to hold it all together there. And it feels, oh my gosh, if I hit a sandbar here, stuff's going to fall apart. We do have those storms of life sometimes. Look at Matthew chapter 7.
Come on, Jason.
Come on, Jason. Storms of life with the recorder. The storms of life. We're going to look at Jesus here closing out his Sermon on the Mount, and he wants to make sure to preach this exact lesson in his Sunday sermon, the storms of life. So he closes out his last point here in verse 24. And he says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sands. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the wind blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. So what do we see here? We see two houses and we see one storm. We see one house made a decision to build a firm house on the foundation on the rock. The other house built on the sand. I don't know if you ever seen in California, we have these houses that build literally on the cliffs right in the sands. You think, man, one good storm, those things are coming down. Yeah. But that's what Jesus is describing here. He's saying, look, you have some guys who are building their house on the sands. Other guys who are building their house, they're firm on the rock. So what's the difference here? One's prepared for the storm. One's not prepared for the storm. But before we can really talk about how can we prepare for these storms of life, what are the storms of life? We really have to understand. So I'm going to talk about the 4 deadliest storms that we're going to face in life at some point, if we're not already going through it. But in order to really get us to grasp how extreme these storms are, I want to compare them to the 4 deadliest